Hey everyone, I'm Steve from GamersNexus.net, and today we are reviewing the Corsair Strafe mechanical keyboard. This is the non-RGB version of the Strafe. There's an RGB version coming out shortly. In theory, this month we'll see the release of that new keyboard. And we don't have it yet, but we will have it for review in very short order. Before moving on to the RGB Strafe, we're looking at the normal Strafe, which is backlit, but not red, green, blue, just red. So you've got one color, and that one color is adjustable in 4 different brightness levels, including off. So you've got 3 different levels of on and then off, which is similar to the Thermal Take or TT Esports Poseidon Z that we reviewed maybe around a year ago, maybe a little bit less. We like that keyboard well enough, so now we're looking at this one, which is a Cherry MX keyboard, and the Strafe uses Cherry MX Red or Cherry MX Brown switches. So those are your 2 switch types. For our review, we had the red switches, and the brown switches are found in the Logitech G710 Plus, which we've previously looked at. The G710 Plus does something a little bit different. They dampen the impact of the brown switch by adding a rubber O-ring on the underside of the keycap. This is technically outside of the spec of Cherry's switch design, but that's what Logitech decided to do, and it makes the brown switch a little bit quieter. In the Corsair Strafe, it's just red and brown, no damping going on in the background. And then in terms of other core features, there is a USB pass-through present, so you've got 2 USB lines coming out of the keyboard. One is for power and one is for data, and those connect into the rear I/O of your system, of course, or wherever else you want to put them. If you do not want the pass-through to be active, you can just elect not to connect the data channel, and that saves one of your USB ports in the back of the case. In the range of other specs, the keyboard has 104 key rollover. It's got media keys that are usable only through the function plus F row keys, so you push FN and an F key to use the play, pause, and forward back keys for your media control, and then it's got a 2-year warranty included with the Strafe keyboard. Corsair's new Strafe keyboard is priced at $110, and that's what it's currently available for on Amazon and other retailers. So it's sort of a competitive price point with actually Corsair's own product, the K70 Vengeance line keyboard, and then Cougar's products, which are priced in the $100 price range. The Strafe falls in between those. And the Strafe is marketed as a semi-discreet but still kind of flashy keyboard. So it's got that slight gamer aesthetic, but it's not going overboard like we've seen with some of the other peripherals out there on the market. Not naming names on that, but I'm sure you've all seen what I'm talking about. The Corsair Strafe uses a mix of metal and plastic for its build construction, and the metal primarily comes in the form of the metal backplate, which is somewhat brilliantly painted red. And the reason this is important is because the backplate is somewhat exposed. This is a Corsair design that they do on the Vengeance line as well. Not a lot of other keyboard manufacturers do this. Most of them will hide most of the internals, if not all of the internals, with a plastic top coating. But if you want that somewhat exposed or more raw look, then the Strafe follows on with other Corsair products and semi-exposes the metal backplate. And the reason it's painted red is because the switch for Cherry's LEDs, in this case just a normal Cherry MX Red switch with an LED placed in it, is not the new Cherry MX RGB LED switch. And that switch positions its LED differently from the normal MX Red. The way it's different is the MX Red and MX Brown, as you'll find in the Strafe keyboard that we're reviewing here, they position the LED in the top and back of the switch. So that means that because of the way the keys are oriented, it's going to cast a shadow downward on the front of the keycap. This shadow is mitigated by the use of a red painted backplate, so that helps provide the appearance that there is a more full spread of the red LED across the surface of the keyboard. And in terms of light spread, we can also talk about the general illumination, vibrance, and the light bleed, all 3 very important things in the case of keyboards. The light bleed on the Strafe is not that bad, actually. Most of it is pretty tight to the keycaps themselves and shines through the legend. The legend on the keycaps is, as you would expect, absent from paint, so all the light shines through the legend, the letter, basically on the keycap, and the keycaps are made of ABS plastic, from what we can tell anyway. So they are plastic keycaps, but they do feel pretty good. And that's something that Michael Kearns talks about more in the full review, which you'll find linked in the description below. Bringing attention briefly to something else, there's something in keyboards, mechanical keyboards primarily, called key chattering. And that's when the spring in the switch, in this case MX Reds or MX Browns, produces a ringing noise upon being pressed. And that's either from bottoming out or just being pressed kind of hard or being used in succession rapidly with many other keys simultaneously in action. So key chattering makes a ringing noise. It's pretty faint, but it is audible, especially if you're a fast typer and depending on what type of switch you're using. In the case of Corsair's Strafe keyboard, we did not find any chattering present in the keys, and that's a good thing. That means that the design has accounted for this and eliminated it effectively, at least to the point where we can't hear it during use. The Corsair Strafe uses the MX switches across the entire keyboard, in the exception of one instance where the top right buttons use rubber domes, and those buttons are for basic controls, so your Windows lock, and that means they're not going to be used frequently, so we can kind of get away with not using the MX switches in that instance, because as a user, you're not really going to care. But other keys include the stabilized keys, so any large key like the spacebar or shift or enter, those will generally be stabilized, especially in a mechanical keyboard, and that is done with a variety of means, but the primary one is a metal bar that goes underneath the keycap and helps stabilize the input so that it's more uniformly dispersing your force when you press down on the key. In the case of the Strafe, the spacebar and other stabilized keys still actuate linearly, so they don't feel that different from pressing the regular MX Red switch keys of normal size, which is a good thing. One thing we did want to complain about with the Strafe was its bottom row of keys is a non-standard size. This means that if you're the type of person who likes to bling out your keyboard with a whole bunch of different keys or a keycap set, like you can buy online, different types of keycaps for different games, you're going to have issues with the bottom row where the size is non-standard, so do keep that in mind. Pulling apart the Strafe reveals that a Panasonic 32181 controller is used for the lighting, which is the same controller as used in the RGB K-Series Corsair keyboards. The Strafe only uses one of these, where the RGB boards use two, so that's the one primary difference. And then looking further, we see an NXP 11U37F-501 processor is used as the primary input controller on the device. Internal build quality is definitely proven as high by way of clean soldering and well-marked construction and well laid out components and high quality components. So this is something that we can stand behind as a high quality build and say firmly that Corsair has done well with. We awarded the Corsair Strafe with our high build quality and Editor's Choice Awards for its high build quality and general usefulness in the world of mechanical keyboards, which is sort of flooded right now with low quality components and with oddly priced components and with a huge move toward RGB. And that's not to say Corsair isn't moving toward RGB further, because they're doing it with the Strafe, but there's still a use for single color keyboards. Not everyone wants to spend 150 plus, 170, 180, and so on an RGB keyboard. So in that case, the Strafe is a welcomed addition to the world of mechanical keyboards, and at its price, $110, it's really primarily competing with Corsair's Vengeance K70 at $120 and the Cougar 700K at around $100. There are other keyboards in that range, of course. Rosewell's got some, the Apollo, for instance, and Thermaltake's got their TTE Sports Poseidon keyboards with the RGB one shipping very shortly, and those are worth considering as well, but the Strafe really is in a class of its own in terms of build quality until you start looking at higher end stuff, like in the 110 plus, 120, 130 range. We think that the lighting for the Strafe keyboard is vibrant, it's uniformly dispersed, and the red painted metal backplate is actually pretty brilliant. So in all of those instances, definitely a big plus for Corsair. The Q software, we had a few small bugs with, but nothing major, nothing that was inhibiting to use, and could all be pretty much worked around or averted. And in terms of the Q software's actual support, its functionality, the macro programming and the light programming and level monitoring and stuff like that, it all works pretty well. It's just some of the basic UI that we had bugs with on, for example, a laptop screen, but you're not going to be encountering that use case too regularly anyway. overall, the Corsair Strafe is something that we think is worth buying, and if you want to read more about the actual science behind the mechanical keyboards and the mechanical keyboard market, check the link in the description below to go to Michael Kern's article on gamersnexus.net, and check out our specs dictionary, which you can find on gamersnexus.net as well in the main menu item, and that'll tell you all about hysteresis and key chatter and keycaps and actuation pressure and all of that stuff. Definitely cool to learn. If you like this kind of content, hit the Patreon link in the post-roll video that will roll right after my face gets off the screen, and see if you are maybe interested in supporting us. We've had a few supporters pick up lately, and we are hugely thankful to you, and of course we'll continue to push good content. So thanks again for all the support and for watching the video. The Strafe is worth looking at, but there's plenty of other options that we're reviewing in short order as well, so stick around for those, and I will see you all next time.